Have you ever noticed this? The people who talk the most are often the ones who become the most uncomfortable when you say nothing at all. They are used to filling the space, used to controlling the conversation, used to being noticed, reacted to, validated. And then you show up. You don't argue. You don't explain. You don't push back. You don't try to prove you're right. You simply remain silent. And something strange happens. They start talking more. Their voice gets louder. Their gestures become sharper. Their words come faster. Not because you are weak, but because your silence disrupts their power. Stoicism calls this a very rare form of strength, the strength of someone who does not need to react in order to exist. Most people believe silence means losing, that it means having no voice, that it allows others to dominate you. That is how insecure people see the world. A Stoic sees it differently. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is a refusal to play a game that isn't worth playing. When you don't react, you deny others the very thing they are looking for, a sense of control. And that is exactly what unsettles them. Look closely. People who need to speak loudly usually need validation. People who must win every argument are often protecting a fragile ego. People who cannot tolerate silence usually cannot tolerate not being the center. Because in silence, no one is confirming who they are. Epictetus once said, very bluntly, "If you are disturbed by what someone says, you have handed your power over to them." In other words, whoever can provoke your reaction is controlling you. This is why your silence frightens the loudest people. Because you don't give them emotion, you don't give them a fight, you don't give them a stage, they speak, you stay quiet. And in that empty space, they are forced to face their own insecurity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Keep your soul steady, no matter what others do, not to appear superior, but to avoid losing self-command. When you don't react, you are not beneath anyone. You are operating on a different level." Here is a truth very few people are willing to say out loud. Loud people need your reaction to feel real. Grounded people do not. And that difference creates an imbalance that makes others deeply uncomfortable. They cannot read you. They cannot predict you. They cannot control you. And what human beings fear most is what they cannot control. Your silence sends a very clear message without you ever saying a word. I don't need to defeat you to know where I stand. That message strikes directly at the ego. But understand this clearly. Not all silence is strength. Not everyone who stays quiet is powerful. There is silence born from fear, silence born from avoidance, and silence born from self-mastery. Stoicism speaks only of the third, and if you cannot tell the difference, you may be deceiving yourself. In the next part, we must confront the most important question. When is silence strength, and when is it simply surrender in disguise? This is the boundary most people never learn to recognize. Let's be honest before going further. Silence does not automatically make you strong. Many people remain silent not because they are grounded, but because they are afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of conflict, afraid of being judged, afraid that if they speak, they won't be accepted. Stoicism does not call this strength. It calls it a loss of inner command. And if you don't recognize this, you can imprison yourself in silence and call it maturity. The difference is here. Silence from fear feels tight inside. Silence from strength feels calm. Ask yourself one simple question. When you remain silent, do you feel lighter or heavier? if silence leaves you feeling bitter, suppressed, replaying the moment for hours. That is not quiet strength. That is emotion being buried alive. Marcus Aurelius warned about this early on. Do not let your soul be twisted just to please others. Someone with grounded silence does not need to tell themselves, just let it go. They don't swallow emotion. They choose not to react because they understand the value of their energy. They know not every comment deserves an answer. Not every provocation deserves engagement. Not everyone deserves access to your voice. Their silence is selective, not submissive. There is a common misunderstanding. Many people hear about Stoicism and assume staying silent is always noble. No, Stoicism does not teach you to become invisible. It teaches you to stand still when needed and step forward when it matters. Silence is only powerful when it comes from the ability to speak and the discipline to choose not to. If you stay silent because you're afraid to speak, that is not strength. That is fear wearing the mask of discipline. Epictetus was very clear. If you cannot speak when it is necessary, then your silence is not a choice. In other words, strength is not how long you stay silent, but whether you have the freedom to speak. Pay attention to these signs. Weak silence often comes with avoiding eye contact, a withdrawn posture, self-blame afterward. Strong silence feels relaxed, complete, free of explanation. Someone with strong silence does not dwell on it afterward. They chose, and they move on. So the real question is not, should I stay silent or not? It is, am I silent because I am in control, or because I am afraid to step forward? If you are not honest here, Stoic philosophy becomes nothing more than an excuse to hide. And this is the key point. Your silence scares loud people not because you don't speak, but because they sense you don't need to. The difference is subtle, but human beings feel it immediately. In the next part, we will go deeper into why loud people need your reaction so badly. What is happening inside them that turns your silence into a threat? This is where the psychological picture becomes clear. Here is a truth few people say plainly. The loudest people are often the most insecure. They don't talk so much because they have depth. They talk because they cannot tolerate emptiness. That emptiness is called silence. Silence does not threaten grounded people. It only threatens those who cannot stand being alone with themselves. When you stay silent, you are not attacking them, but you are doing something more dangerous. You are not validating their existence. Loud people live on reaction. They speak, waiting for your response. They provoke, waiting for your emotion. They show off, waiting for your admiration. When you remain silent, that chain breaks. And when it breaks, everything they were trying to hide begins to surface. Watch closely. When you don't react, loud people often raise their voice, repeat the same story. Try harder to prove they're right. Turn sarcastic or mocking. Escalate the provocation, not because you are weak, but because your silence has removed the mirror they rely on. And without it, they don't know who they are anymore. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they lost control. Stoicism has a name for this: dependence on external validation. Epictetus said it plainly. If you need other people to react in order to feel valuable, then you have handed your power to them. Loud people do not live on inner strength. They live on recognition. And your silence cuts off that supply. There is a very clear psychological mechanism at work here. When you don't react, they are forced to. Hear themselves. Face the emptiness. Realize that no one is affirming them. This creates deep discomfort, not surface-level irritation, but existential discomfort. Have you noticed this? Truly confident people never force you to respond. They speak and they leave space. Only those who fear being ignored constantly pull attention back to themselves. Your silence is not an action. It is a mirror. And many people do not like seeing who they really are reflected back at them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not be dragged into another person's chaos. Stand firm and let them reveal themselves." You don't need to expose anyone. You just need to not participate. Silence, used correctly, allows truth to walk into the light on its own. This is why loud people say things like, "Why are you so arrogant? Why aren't you saying anything? You think you're better than me?" No. You simply don't need them to feel that you exist, and that terrifies them. But be careful. This kind of silence is not meant for revenge, not to prove a point, not to win. If you use silence as a manipulation tool, it will eventually turn against you. A Stoic does not play power games. A Stoic steps out of the game entirely. In the next part, we'll talk about the defining moment, when silence is wisdom, and when silence becomes self-destruction, 'cause silence at the right time is strength, silence at the wrong time is self-erasure. Not all silence comes from power, and Stoicism does not teach you to disappear. There are two kinds of silence. One makes you taller, one makes you smaller. From the outside, people may not see the difference. But inside, you always know where you stand. Silence born of strength comes from choice. Silence born of weakness comes from fear. The difference rests on one simple question. If I spoke right now, would I be speaking for truth or for protection? Stoics are not afraid to speak. They just don't speak unnecessarily. Epictetus said, "Be silent most of the time, but when you speak, say what is worth saying." Silence is not avoiding conflict. Silence is refusing to engage in meaningless conflict. Look at yourself honestly. There are times you stayed silent because you didn't want to be disliked. You feared losing status. You feared being challenged. You feared making others uncomfortable. That is not Stoic calm. That is self-betrayal. That kind of silence does not make you intimidating. It makes you invisible. And loud people always attack what is invisible. By contrast, strong silence has clear traits. You can speak, but choose not to. You are not bracing yourself internally. You feel no resentment afterward. You don't feel the need to explain. You are silent because you are not being pulled. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let the words of others pass by you like wind over stone." Not because the stone is weak, but because it does not need to react to exist. Here is a critical sign to watch for. After staying silent, do you feel calm or drained? If calm, you chose correctly. If drained, you were enduring, not choosing. Stoicism does not promote unconscious endurance. It promotes inner discipline. Sometimes true silence requires one short sentence first. No long explanations, no defense, no debate. Just, "I don't agree. This doesn't work for me. We're stopping here." Say it, then silence. That is silence with boundaries. This is what loud people fear most, not total silence, but silence that follows firmness, because then they cannot penetrate you. A Stoic understands this clearly. Not every battle should be avoided, but only necessary battles are worth entering. Silence helps you choose the battlefield. In the next part, we'll confront a hard truth. Why the more correctly you use silence, the more you will be disliked, before you are respected. The truth is this: proper silence does not make you more lovable. It makes you harder to control. And that is what loud people cannot tolerate. Those who live on reaction need constant feedback from others. They need eye contact, agreement, argument, opposition, anything to feel that they exist. When you remain silent, you don't affirm them, you don't deny them, you don't feed their emotions, you cut the energy source they rely on. Your silence forces them to face themselves. And that is where the discomfort begins. Watch closely. When you don't react, people will talk more, repeat themselves, raise their voice, become sarcastic, or resort to personal attacks. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you didn't do what they expected. A Stoic knows this well. An agitated person always reveals more about themselves than about you. Seneca wrote, "An insult only harms you if you accept it." Your silence is how you refuse acceptance. Here is something crucial to remember. Loud people are not afraid that you are weak. They are afraid that you don't need them. When you don't react, they lose their role. And when someone feels they no longer have a role, they create drama to reclaim attention. Your silence ruins that script. This is why those who use silence correctly are often labeled as cold, arrogant, distant, hard to read. But the truth is simple. You are just difficult to manipulate. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You don't need to do anything to prove that you are unharmed. Your silence is the proof." But be careful. Silence is not a tool for punishing others. It is not a psychological tactic. It is the natural consequence of someone who no longer lives by reflex. If you stay silent with the intention of making them afraid, you have already returned to their world. Stoicism does not teach manipulation. It teaches self-mastery. And here is the paradox. When you stop trying to control other people's reactions, you begin to control yourself. When you stop seeking influence, you become influential. In the next part, we go deeper. How to remain silent without becoming isolated, and how a Stoic connects with others without losing inner strength. There is a very common fear. If I stay silent too much, will I be left behind? Stoics understand this fear, but they do not let it rule them. Proper silence does not push people away. It pushes the wrong people away. And that is not a loss, it is a release. Those who need constant reactions from you do not want connection. They want control. When you stop providing reactions, they leave on their own. Not because you are wrong, but because you no longer fit their system. By contrast, healthy people respond very differently to your silence. They don't pressure you to speak. Don't overinterpret. Don't see silence as a threat. Don't try to occupy your space. They respect your rhythm. This is the key point. Silence allows you to see clearly who is with you for who you are, and who is only there for your reactions. Seneca once said, "Friendship is built not on need, but on stability." Silence is the test of that stability. A Stoic does not isolate himself. He selects. He may have fewer relationships, but each one requires no tension, no performance, no defense, no proving. There is a rare kind of connection, when two people can sit beside each other without filling the space, not because there is nothing to say, but because nothing needs to be said. That kind of silence does not create fear. It creates safety. People near you feel free to be themselves. And that only happens when you are at peace with yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Become someone whose presence does not disturb order." Silence is part of that order. However, there is a very subtle trap. Using silence to avoid intimacy. You are not pulled in, but you also never open the door. That is no longer Stoic strength. That is emotional armor. Silence is strength when it comes with the capacity to connect, not when it becomes a wall. In the next part, we address the hardest question: when must a Stoic speak? And how to speak without destroying the inner strength you have built. Stoicism does not teach you to be silent forever. It teaches you to speak only when words carry weight. Here is a difficult truth. Those who stay silent too long out of fear of losing connection lose themselves. Those who speak too much out of fear of being dismissed lose respect. The Stoic stands in the middle. A person with inner strength does not speak to release emotion. He speaks to shape reality. When a Stoic speaks, people listen, not because his voice is loud, but because it doesn't tremble. No excess, no drama, no justification. Why their words carry weight. They don't speak often. They don't speak when agitated. They don't speak to be understood. They don't speak to win. They speak to end. Ambiguity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if this must be said, say it simply. A Stoic does not decorate the truth. When boundaries are crossed, they don't ask, "Do you understand how I feel?" They say, "I don't accept this. This doesn't work for me. If this continues, I will step away." Short, clear, not aggressive. And here is what makes others hesitate. A Stoic does not argue about boundaries. He acts on them. No threats, no repetition, no further explanation. Loud people are used to pulling others into emotional chaos. When you don't enter that cycle, they lose their weapon. Seneca wrote, "The greatest power is the ability to leave without creating chaos. Those with quiet strength don't need to win arguments. They win by not needing to stay." But remember this: you don't speak to prove you are strong. You speak to protect what matters. If no core value is threatened, the Stoic chooses silence. If one is, he does not hesitate. And once he has spoken once, he does not repeat himself. Not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. Here is the final paradox. The less someone speaks, the harder their words are to ignore. In the next part, we move into the deepest reason of all. Why your silence makes loud people feel deeply unsettled. Loud people are not afraid that you are stronger than them. They are afraid they cannot read you. People feel safe when they can predict someone else's reaction. You smile. They know you're pleased. You get angry. They know they hit the right button. You explain. They know they still have influence. But when you stay silent, there is no signal, no confirmation, no familiar reflex. Their control system freezes. Those who live through noise need reactions to define themselves. They need attention, feedback, confrontation, validation. Your silence removes all of that in a single moment. And then their mind starts working for you. They begin to wonder, did I go too far? Is this person judging me? Why aren't they reacting? The empty space becomes pressure. Stoicism understands this clearly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Allow others to wrestle with their own thoughts. Silence is how you return inner responsibility to the right owner. Loud people are used to defining the space. When you don't fill it, they lose their advantage, not because you attack, but because you don't participate. There is a psychological paradox. The more someone needs attention, the more they fear being ignored. Your silence triggers that fear, not because you want to, but because you don't need them. Seneca said, "No one harms us more than our own assumptions." Loud people are wounded by their own interpretations when you stop giving them data. And this is crucial. Stoic silence is not punitive. It does not aim to teach a lesson. It does not aim to control. It does not aim to manipulate. It is simply a withdrawal from the spiral. Loud people are used to fighting, but they don't know what to do when there is no fight. You don't defeat them. You make the game lose its meaning. However, this is a delicate boundary. Silence has power only when it comes from inner strength. If you stay silent to retaliate, to compete, to control, others will feel it, and the power disappears. In the next part, we will talk about the cost of powerful silence, because not everyone is willing to pay that price. Your silence will not please everyone. And if you believe that living by Stoicism will earn universal respect, you misunderstood it from the beginning. Powerful silence always comes with a cost: being misunderstood. Some will think you are arrogant, some will think you are cold, some will say, "This person is hard to approach. This person looks down on others." Not because you did something wrong, but because you didn't react according to the script they expected. People like what is easy to read. Predictable people make them comfortable. Unpredictable people make them uneasy. Your silence places you in the second group. Stoicism does not promise an easy path. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be prepared to be misunderstood if you choose to live rightly. You cannot both live true to yourself and be correctly understood by everyone." Another cost: being excluded from certain circles. When you no longer join the drama, react emotionally, compete for status, constantly prove yourself, some people will no longer see you as a fit, and they will leave. This hurts, but look closely. They didn't leave because you were silent. They left because you stopped feeding what they needed from you. Seneca was direct. Losing a relationship is sometimes the price of keeping yourself. Your silence is a natural filter. Some people stay only as long as you react. When you stop reacting, they lose their reason. Another cost: a period of loneliness. When you step out of the noise, you find yourself in between. No longer belonging to the old crowd, not yet connected to the new one. That gap causes many people to turn back. But the Stoic understands. The gap is where inner strength is forged. Epictetus said, "Do not fear walking alone if the path is right." Those who cannot tolerate solitude return to noise just to feel they belong. Those who are steady enough use that time to become deeper. And here is a truth few say out loud. Not everyone deserves to hear your voice. Not everyone is calm enough to understand your silence. Powerful silence is not about avoiding life. It is how you choose what kind of life is allowed into your space. In the next part, we will address when silence is strength and when silence becomes self-betrayal. This is the line that decides whether you are Stoic or simply avoiding life. Stoicism does not teach you to be silent all the time. And if you think a Stoic is someone who always endures, you have misunderstood the philosophy. Silence is only strength when it is chosen, not when it is forced. There are two kinds of silence. 1. Silence from mastery. 2. Silence from fear. They look the same on the outside. Inside, they are completely opposite. Silence from fear has the feeling of contraction. You feel tightness in your chest, words trapped inside, unprocessed emotion, frustration building afterward. You are silent not because you choose to be, but because you are afraid to speak. This is not Stoicism. This is self-betrayal. Silence born of mastery is different. You are calm, not triggered, not trying to win, not needing to be understood. You are silent because you have already judged. This is not worth my energy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act against your own nature just to please others." That is the standard. So when does silence become wrong? When that silence pulls you away from your core values. If you stay silent when you are publicly disrespected, your boundaries are crossed repeatedly, your values are trampled, disrespect becomes a habit, and you remain silent just to keep the peace. That is no longer strength. That is slow surrender. A Stoic does speak, but not emotionally. They speak briefly, clearly. Once, without long explanations, without asking permission. For example, "I don't accept being spoken to this way. We're stopping here. If this continues, I'll walk away." No threats, no arguing, just boundaries. The weight is not in the tone of your voice. It lies in your willingness to act if that boundary is crossed. Seneca said, "The strong do not argue about limits. They live by them." The weak talk endlessly about how they deserve respect. The grounded don't need to say it. And this is the hardest part. You must accept losing some people when you are no longer easy to cross. Not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer convenient. In the next part, the final part, we will talk about who you become when this silence seeps into every life choice. No longer a technique, but an identity. By now, you may have realized something essential. This silence is not a strategy. It is a consequence. You don't use silence to control others. You are silent because you are no longer controlled. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to react. You don't need to explain every misunderstanding. You don't need to correct everyone's opinion. Not because you are above anyone, but because you are steady within yourself. Those who talk constantly are still looking for their footing. Those who know when to be silent already have it. Marcus Aurelius never tried to appear intimidating. His authority came from his unshakability. Seneca didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone made others adjust. Epictetus didn't need to convince anyone. He simply lived consistently with what he believed was right. And thousands of years later, people still listened to them. Not because they were loud, but because they could not be moved. This is why your silence unsettles the loudest people. Not because you threaten them, but because you don't need them. And people are always afraid of what they cannot provoke. Quiet strength doesn't shout. It stands still. And when you stand still long enough, the world reveals who is running and who is grounded. If you've listened this far, you may feel tired. Tired of explaining too much, reacting too quickly, proving yourself too often, holding tension just to avoid being disrespected. If so, you are not weak. You are waking up. Stoicism does not promise a comfortable life. It promises inner strength strong enough that you are no longer dragged around by other people's noise. You don't need to become intimidating. You only need to become unshakable. And that silence will speak for you. If this video made you pause for even a moment, press like to support the channel. If you want to continue building Stoic inner strength, quiet, steady, and lasting, subscribe to Stoic Crowned Silence. And leave a comment below. What moment in your life made you realize that silence isn't weakness, but power? We read every comment. And every comment is someone choosing to live more deeply in a world that is far too loud. Until we meet again in the next stillness of Stoic Crowned Silence.